friends, and welcome back to the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. This is Deepa from Designs by Dee, and today I'm going to be sharing this gorgeous watercolored floral bouquet, and I'm going to show you that you don't need any extensive skills to put this one together. Beginner skills is all you need, even though it may look more complicated. So we're going to be using the Bouquet Builder die set. And this one is a large one. You get so many different pieces to create the actual bouquet, and then you also get some pieces to create the like the cellophane or something that would go around the bouquet, the wrapping. I'm going to be using vellum for that, and I'm also going to be using the Corinne brush markers for my watercoloring. So you don't need anything too special. If you have the brush markers, you can use them. If you have other markers, you could use them. If you have other watercolors, you could use those too. So it's really just a matter of preference and what you have on hand. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this set. I'm using some watercolor paper to do my die cutting because it's just going to give you the best watercolor effect. And on top of it, it works better with watercolors so that your colors are more vibrant. They absorb the colors, and then it doesn't make the paper fall apart. It all works better. So use some watercolor paper, whether it's warm press, hot press, cold press, whatever you have on hand, go ahead and use that. And I'm doing all of my die cutting from this, except for the actual wrapping that goes around the bouquet, which I'm cutting from vellum. And I will mention that there are smaller bits that go together on top of that wrapped that goes around the bouquet. You don't have to use those. It's going to be a little hard to attach them without the glue showing, so I think I used a couple bits, but not everything. So now that I have everything pretty much cut out, I'm going to go ahead and start doing my watercoloring. Now you'll notice that I'm using a wooden block here. It's just basically a cutting board, which I picked up from the dollar store. I'm in Canada. If you're in the US, the Dollar Tree. Whatever it is, just pick up something that's inexpensive. I use it for all of my watercoloring, which is why you can see all the paint in the background. But all I've done is I've laid out all of my die cuts. I've kind of kept them together based on that layering guide, so I know what goes with what. And then I've got a palette here. So for me, my palette is just a piece of white cardstock, which I have laminated. You can use any type of palette you'd like. You could use an acrylic block if you don't have a palette. And I'm just starting with my brush marker. So for these more like star-like flowers, I'm using the red Corinne brush marker, and I'm just basically coloring on my palette, and then I'm using my paintbrush with some water to kind of dilute the color and pick it up, and then I'm just placing it on my die cuts. So you'll notice for this flower, there's like a larger portion of the flower and then like a smaller part for the flower. One's more detailed, one's like the background. One goes on top, one goes behind. So I'm first of all diluting that color, and I'm adding like a wash of the color on the entire die cut. And then I'll come back to that color and pick it up again on my palette, and then I'll just start adding it anywhere and everywhere on the detailed portion. So the smaller die cut. We want that to be a little darker, and that's how you're going to create the difference in color. And that's generally what you do with watercoloring, is you build up your color. So my background, or my die cut that's going to go behind, is going to have more of a wash of the color. If I don't like the wash and I want it to be a little darker, I can add more color as it dries, add another layer of color, and then I just darken up the layer that goes on top of that, so there is a difference in color so that you can see the different layers. And this is basically the basis of how I'm going to watercolor all of these die cuts. So same thing with that tulip one. You'll notice that I'm using two colors here. I'm actually using the gold, the yellow colored Corinne marker, and I'm also using a little bit of that red there just to add a little bit of like an orangey color tone to it, so that it has more than just a yellow color. You don't have to do that. I did that kind of with all of my die cuts. You'll notice I added some of the purple to that red one and some of the red to the purple, and I find that mixing colors like this as an accent or a little bit of a highlight allows your bouquet to be a little bit more fluid. So everything's going to match a little more. It's going to look like everything belongs together. I'm doing the same thing with all the other die cuts. So you'll notice on the left, I've colored in, that's actually the bow, which goes on that wrapping, on the outside of the wrapping. So I did that in purple, and then I took a little bit of the red. The purple that I use is lilac here. And then I took a little bit of the red just to add a little bit of highlights here and there. You'll notice that I start off with a certain purple and then I'll come back and I'll add more. And that's the basis of watercoloring. That's all I'm doing. And I'm not like, okay, I'm going to put a shadow here. I'm just putting it anywhere. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And no one is going to notice. Because like I said, this is a very like loose type of like watercolor look. I'm not being too specific or too um, I'm not being too strategic with any of it. I'm just kind of putting my colors anywhere and just seeing how it looks and then kind of altering it based on how it looks. If you like it, if you don't like it, even if you don't like it, just trust the process at this stage because it is going to look like a little bit of a mess and you're going to say, oh my, like what did I do here? But once you put everything together, it's all going to just kind of flow, especially if you're mixing a little bit of the colors here and there. Make sure that your colors work together. So don't go muddying things up by maybe like adding green to the purple. You're going to end up getting brown. So things like that are things you might want to keep in mind. And then for the leaves, I'm coming in with some lush green, which is the darker green, and then grass, which is the lighter green. And all I'm doing is I'm making my stems and my leaves different colors so that again, it creates a variation in my bouquet. If you look at a bouquet of flowers, every stem and every branch is not the same color of green. They're different tones of green, right? So different stems, some are darker, some are lighter, some are more yellowy green. So that's all I'm doing here. You'll notice the two on the left, I've made that more of the grass green. The one in the center is more of the lush green. It's got more of like an emerald tone to it. And then on the right hand, those two bits, I'm kind of mixing the two colors. I'm adding a bit of the lush green and I'm adding a bit of the grass to kind of create a two-tone image. Now, the one piece that's like one from the end there, that one actually has some smaller flowers that go with it. It's the purple flowers I colored there. So that's all going to come together nicely and go together well. So keep that in mind when you're adding your colors. Like what color of the flower do you want to go with the branches, right? Do you want the darker green or the lighter green or a mix? And here's another tip to keep in mind. You'll notice I'm taking it a step further. I'm adding a little bit of the purple to the branches too, and a little bit of the red. Because when you look at the flower bouquet, a normal flower bouquet, you'll notice sometimes if you look at it in the light, the colors of the petals will kind of bounce off the leaves. If you look really closely, you'll notice this. And this again, by adding a little bit of the flower color to the leaves, looks really pretty. And again, it helps everything kind of be more cohesive and go together. Okay, so I waited for all of those die cuts to dry. If you don't want to wait, you can use a heat tool. I think I did that as well. And now I'm just putting them together. So I've kept everything on my board. That's the best thing about it. If you want to make sure everything's completely dry, have a session where you do your watercoloring and die cutting. Put it aside, come to it the next day or later on in the day, and then do your assembling. So I've gone ahead and I've put these flowers together. It's really easy to put these together. And what I do for the most part is I try my best to just add some liquid adhesive just to the center of the flowers. Now on the tulip, it's going to be a little different because it attaches more so at the bottom and you do kind of have to put it more on the whole die cut. But in the flowers that attach through the center, I'll attach them through a little dot of glue in the center. That way I can kind of manipulate the petals and kind of curve them, zhuzh them up, make them look a little different, and that way it also gives it a bit of a 3D look. And you'll notice I'm doing that even here with the tulip. I've added everything and I'm kind of sticking it down, but I am going to kind of fold back, kind of curve the petals a little bit so it has more of a realistic look. So as I mentioned, I did not fully let everything dry on its own, so I'm drying some of the leaves. They were the last ones that I did, right? So they're the wettest. And I'm just using my heat tool to dry these. You could always use this method as well if you're impatient like I am. So after drying those up, now I can take that one stem, which is this one here. And this one is meant to be used with those smaller round flowers, which I painted in the purple. And I'm just going to glue those to the stem here. Now there is a die that cuts the little centers of the flowers, and I cut those and I added yellow to those, and those I'm adding now to the center of the flowers. Sometimes when I get lazy, I won't actually cut those centers of the flowers out, and I'll just use some gems to fill those in. So that's also an idea if you hate keeping track of the little die cuts. So I've got everything together now. Now I can start putting together my wrapping for the bouquet. But before I do, you'll notice that the base of that wrapping, which is this piece here, has a little slit. And what you want to do is arrange your flowers, stick your little stems in that slit, and that's how you kind of start putting your bouquet together. So what I like to do is kind of just stick everything in, get the stems and the flowers to the right heights, and then as I'm going to show you here, I will turn it over and just use a small piece of clear tape to attach everything together. If you wanted, you could glue these together. I find it easier to use that bit of tape. That way I can still play around with the bits that I'm adding and, pull things up a little further, pull them out to the left or right. It just allows for that arrangement that you would normally do with flowers, except we're doing it with paper flowers. So once I've got my bouquet where I want it to go and I'm happy with it, I've got my tape here. As I mentioned, it's clear tape. I've got just a small section so that it doesn't show through the vellum. I've kind of taped it all together, and now I'm just adding a little bit of glue behind the die cuts where I want them to kind of stick to each other so that my bouquet doesn't kind of fall apart on my card, because that little bit of tape is only holding your stems together. So you want to make sure that your flowers are kind of put in place as well. And I want this bouquet to kind of be one whole piece before I attach it to my card. Now you'll notice I'm using some foam adhesive to kind of prop up some of these flowers. I find foam adhesive comes in handy for bouquets, floral arrangements, any type of thing that you're putting on your card where you want some items to be in the foreground and you want items to be in the background. Stuff that's in the foreground, the foam tape helps create that bit of dimension. Now you'll notice I've got that bouquet together. Now I'm adding the rest of the wrapping. You see I added that strip that kind of comes across the front, and all I did was add like a little dab of glue on either tip, on the left and the right side of that strip, and attached it. Remember, this is vellum, so if you go adding a whole bunch of glue, you're going to see it through the vellum. So you want to add just a tiny little bit. That's enough to allow your piece to adhere, but is not going to be seen. So you'll notice here I'm adding the smaller bits, and you can see that little dab of glue. So I only add a couple of those because I don't want too much of my glue to show through the vellum. I'm adding that bottom portion that attaches and covers up those stems. And don't worry if you add too much glue to the center there. Your bow will cover up some of that, so just keep that in mind. So as I attach these, I'm adding the glue to the very top where that strip attaches to the bottom bits, and my ribbon or my bow is going to cover up any excess glue there. So there's my bouquet ready to go. Now for my actual card, I'm going to use this older hot foil plate. It's called Mod Stripes. It came out last Christmas or the Christmas before that. I love this foil plate. I'm not going to use it to foil. I'm going to do some dry embossing with it. So I'm attaching my white cardstock to it. That's just A2 size. I've got a rubber mat here, and notice the placement. I'm also going to put an acrylic pad on the top and then put that through my die cutting machine with the platform. Now, dependent on your die cutting machine, you may have to play around with shims and how you want to put this together to get the right pressure in order to create that embossed look. So do keep that in mind. I use the Sizzix Platinum, and I noticed that platform AB, then I put the rubber mat, I put the hot foil plate, the cardstock, and then another acrylic pad on top. It does the job. Now I'm also taking that piece and I'm adding some gold metallic splatter to it. I did also cut out a slimline mini frame, the smaller frame, and I added some gold metallic splatter to that. And I'm also adding a little bit to the bouquet. So when it all comes together, it's got like a nice splattered artistic look to it. Now for my sentiment, I'm grabbing these dies here. I'm grabbing the high just to keep it simple because I don't want to cover too much of that bouquet. Remember, it's pretty large as it is. And I'm just taking the detail die there. Now keep in mind for those dies, you get like the detail portion plus the shadow. I'm going to cut this out of some gold matte cardstock. And I also cut out the shadow from some vellum. I find that the shadow really helps for making sure that you get your letters put on straight. So I like having the shadow. I tend to use vellum if I really don't want it to show. And that's basically what I'm doing here because I really want the high to stand out. The vellum's just to make sure that those letters are in place in the right way. Okay, so now I'm kind of cutting down my panel and I have my card base here. It's the top folding A2 size card base. And I'm going to go ahead and attach my embossed panel with all that gold splatter. If you don't have gold metallic watercolor or anything like that, you can use maybe one of the colors that you have from your bouquet. That would also look really nice. So I did cut out 2 of these mini slimline frames. One was from some gold glitter cardstock. One was from white, which we added a bit of that splatter onto. I'm kind of putting those together in an offset fashion. And I'm using it on an angle as kind of like a frame for my bouquet, and I'm sticking it in there. And then I'm also kind of figuring out where I want my sentiment to go here and kind of arranging things on the card where I think it might look best. I do this for all my cards. I think I've mentioned this more in recent videos because I think people sometimes get the wrong impression that we just know how everything goes together and it looks great. I think we spend a lot of time like placing things here. Does it look better there? Does it look better there? And that's all part of the creative process. So don't feel like there's something wrong with you, like you don't know where things should be placed on your card. It's all really what looks good to your eye, and that's kind of what I tend to do is move things around until I find the best position for it. And then even once I've kind of got things set in my mind where I want it to go, when I actually assemble it, like I'm doing here, I'll still kind of move things around a little bit. So it always kind of changes. Now you can see I'm doing that right there. So I moved the frame a little bit, like I put it at more of an angle to kind of go in line with the stripes that are on the card so it doesn't look too awkward or weird. I did attach the bouquet to the frame first, and now I'm attaching the frame with the bouquet all in one go onto this background here. And now I've got my sentiment. Now keep in mind, remember the back of the sentiment has just vellum on it, so I want to be careful. I'm adding some thin foam adhesive to kind of prop up the portions that need to be propped up that are not going to overlap the bouquet. And yeah, this is just to create a little bit of height so it doesn't kind of get lost in here. I always love to add dimension anywhere that I can, and foam tape is like my best friend. So I'm adding it just in places where, like I said, it's not going to overlap the bouquet. The parts that overlap, can add a little bit of liquid adhesive, but I'm sure that the foam adhesive is enough. And keep in mind you want that adhesive to go just behind that matte gold die cut because otherwise it'll show through the vellum and then that's not going to look so great. So I'm just using my reverse grip tweezers here, which really come in handy when taking off the backing from these smaller pieces of adhesive here. And then I'll go ahead and attach this to my card. Like so. Now for the final steps of this card, I'm going to add some gems to this. So I've actually got these gold metallic pearls, which are carried in the Crafty Meraki shop. Now I don't know if you guys know this, but if you're a bling girl like me, I love gems, I love the pearls, I love all types of extra little things that you can stick on your cards. The Crafty Meraki shop has a ton of gorgeous gems, so I do encourage you to check those out. They're beautiful, and you can always just grab a whole bunch of gems as you grab all the great products that you want. So I've added just a few there in the background for a bit of fun. I've got enough splatter, so I only added 5, and that's pretty much my card for today. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed the video. Everything I've used is linked in the description below and can be found in the Crafty Meraki store. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys again next Sunday. Bye.